Let's begin by just releasing some of the baggage that we carry around with us. And in this case, you don't have to look for which pieces of baggage you want to release, because let's just release everything that happened prior to the ringing of this bell. Now, releasing doesn't mean permanently letting go, but just for the duration of this practice so that we lighten our load. And that's quite profound. That is quite profound. If we were to release everything prior to the ringing of the bell, that wouldn't only mean the releasing of everything that happened this morning and yesterday and the days before that. But it also means emerging into this practice like a child, a very young child, full of curiosity, full of interest, practicing for the first time. Why is this important? It's important just because we emerge into this practice with a freshness, with a newness. That makes everything interesting, fascinating. Remember how we experience in the past when you experienced things for the first time? When you went on a holiday, when you went to a new place, when you tasted a new food, hopefully a food that you liked. Your mind very often left many of its stories, its problems behind, and it emerged into the present moment. It aligned itself with your one or more of your five senses. And it's perhaps a useful moment to just reflect on our lives, on how very often we find ourselves bored, especially during these COVID times when many of us have been spending more time at home than usual, more time in our own neighborhoods and our own towns. Have you ever found yourself bored? Maybe even momentarily. Have you ever noticed yourself getting bored and looking for some stimulation? Switching on the television, looking for a good book, a new piece of music, looking through holiday brochures, dreaming about being somewhere else. That's all fine, but we're looking at those moments when boredom was driving us. Boredom is usually a very, very strong indication of the level to which we are identified with our mind, where we are existing within our memories. And I'll just come back to some of the teachings of Eckhart Tolle just to illustrate this. He talks about how I love his example about flowers because it's something most of us can relate to. When we were young children, and I remember that because I remember when my son was very young and we used to take walks in the park. We used to come back with sticks and pebbles and stones and funny leaves and occasionally the odd shell. Everything was fascinating. Everything was new. Everything was interesting. And then Eckhart Tolle speaks about, he uses the example of flowers. Initially, we're fascinated by a new flower, a fascinating flower, its scent, its petals, its shades. And then soon, and we know this as children, we are taught this is called a flower. You spell it Flower. And then we create a filing cabinet. That's the way I like to describe it, a filing cabinet within our mind. And that's specifically for flowers. And if you can imagine, you've got a filing cabinet for your home, for most of your possessions, for the walls that surround you right now, for the chair, the furniture. We've created different filing cabinets within our mind. And so most of us, Eckhart Tolle, he says, when we see the flower, when we see a flower, we might be in the park, we might be at the florist. Instead of noticing that flower in front of us, with its unique shade, with its unique and specific number of petals, with its very unique scent, it may even be at a particular stage in its blooming. But instead, we look straight through it because it enters into our experience through our eyes and moves directly into the mind, directly into that filing cabinet, which has been specifically created for flowers. And we do that with the trees around us. We do that with our possessions, the walls that surround us, the furniture, people. And it's so much more vivid with people. Many of us, we grew up in different parts of the world. Inevitably, we would have been told certain things about people who dressed a certain way, who had a particular shade of skin color, who were a particular shape, who had particular types of hair. And we created filing cabinets within our minds. And unconsciously, when we come across people who might just tick one of the boxes, a particular skin color, a particular language, a particular type of clothing, or body art, or piercings, we automatically place them into one of these filing cabinets, believing we know everything there is to know about them. We call that judgment. Failing to see the individual in front of us, full of desires, full of wants, full of likes, full of passions, full of interests. Eckhart Tolle often reminds us that these practices are about moving beyond the mind, beyond these concepts. I think it was a philosopher who said, "The moment you label me, you negate me." And that is what I refer to in this practice as a new beginning, entering into this practice as a child with the innocence and interest and curiosity of a child. We have a filing cabinet for meditation. Some of us might have a filing cabinet within our mind for spiritual practices, for mindfulness. Let's free ourselves of all of these labels and turn this into a practice of simply sitting and breathing. And yes, when you entered into this practice, you entered into a mindfulness practice. But you can even free yourself of that label. The reason many facilitators, many teachers refer to this practice as mindfulness is it simply means it becomes an opportunity to observe the movements and the workings within the mind. And with that, it can sometimes be nice to simply begin at the very core of this practice, the very essence of this practice, where many of the ancient sages, the ancient teachers who wrote their words down or spoke their words about these practices, they divided existence into three categories, three levels. The first one, the world of matter. That's where our bodies are. Feel your body. Feel the furniture upon which your body is resting. Matter. And if you need to remind yourself, you could even take a peek around you at the walls, seeing the walls for the first time, seeing the furniture for the first time. This world of matter, not only limited to this room, not only limited to our bodies and our organs, but the street outside us, the vehicles, the cars, the homes, the buildings, the trees, the forests, the mountains, this whole planet called Earth, the moon, the sun, the trillions and trillions of stars, all a part of this first category, matter, which we, even through the Hubble telescope, are only experiencing a tiny glimpse. And then they went on to describe a second category, and that they referred to as the mind. Notice how they separated it. Matter from mind. And if you need to understand the mind a little bit better, Michael Singer, one of my favorite writers on subjects such as this, he describes the mind as an energy field that can be programmed. Remember the programs we're running? I am of a male or female gender. I have so and so sexuality. I have accomplished this. I have these awards. I have this education or lack of education. I have these bank statements, the finances, the health, the body shape. Programs. Many, many different programs running at the same time. And a Sufi teacher that I often read, he helps us to understand the mind by simply reminding us of all that we cannot see. Sound waves, the sound of this bell, vibrating air molecules that we cannot see, yet they are there, moving at a particular speed, just like the thunder that we hear. And then there is light moving at an even faster speed, which is why we see the lightning before we hear the thunder. And then the sages refer to many different categories, but they refer to the speed of thought as being faster than sound, faster than light. The speed of thought, which is why many of us are actually here in this practice, because the mind takes us to countless places, making us relive countless events, conversations, experiences, both in the past and in the future. And it gets exhausting. But my reason for beginning in this way is simply to remind us that the mind, a separate entity according to these teachers, the world of matter, the existence of the mind, the second category, and then they refer to the third category. And the third category, beyond this world of matter. And if you can even begin to imagine how vast the universe of matter is, if you can just imagine, that's all we can do. And our mind just does not have the ability to comprehend that there are more stars in this universe than there are grains of sand on this planet called Earth, according to the scientists. How vast is that? And that is only the category of matter. That third category, in this practice, we refer to it as the witnessing presence, awareness, consciousness, stillness. It really doesn't matter what you label it as, because it's more than that. And it is this part that we will tap into in our practice at this moment. And in fact, we'll simply call it the present moment, the eternal present moment, always the present moment. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 500 years ago, all experienced only as the present moment, the eternal present moment. The same with the future, will only be experienced as the present moment. And as we think about what happened this morning, yesterday, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we do it from the present moment. And we begin to discover and get a glimpse into one of the most fascinating qualities of the mind, its ability to create time. In fact, its very existence depends on time. Even where you find yourself complaining about something in your present moment, is there anything about this present moment that you'd like to change? Is there a sound? Is there a sensation within or around your body? Or maybe even the movement of your mind. Is your mind moving a little bit too much? Notice I used the word too much. That means there is a standard that exists within the mind. You've experienced that silence. You've experienced the beautiful sunset. You've experienced standing on the shores of a beach where the warm water brushes against your ankles, and you've experienced relative silence. And so you know what it's like to have a quieter mind. And you have a memory of it. And when you're not experiencing it right now, can you notice? You want to move back in time, or you want to move forward into the future, into a moment when your mind is a bit quieter. And so you resist the movements of the mind, you fight against them. And one thing you will notice is when you fight against the present moment, it creates more thoughts. I shouldn't be thinking. I should be meditating. I should know better. I've been practicing for many years. All of these conversations begin. And if it's your mind that is troubling or distracting you, then try something else. Assuming you've never practiced before, just be okay with it. Just be fine with it. Give your mind permission to move in whatever direction it would like to. Have you ever taken a dog for a walk, or maybe been around an animal or something like that, where you tried to control it, but it wanted to move in a particular direction? And it got very tiring trying to control it, trying to pull the leash, call it, tempt it. Now, what if you were to just give up all responsibilities, let go of the leash, just allow it to move in whatever direction? Let's just assume you're in a very safe space. See what happens when you allow the mind to move. You begin, first of all, to discover the mind to be that separate entity. From the awareness, you begin to discover that the awareness, the presence, is all around the mind, all around the thought. And if you can imagine a very large circle, let's call that large circle awareness. And within that circle, there is a very, very small circle within that large circle. In this practice, you would imagine the mind to be that small circle. And it's very tiring. We go through the sadness, the anger, the frustrations, the anxieties. When we believe ourselves to be that tiny circle, constantly moving from left to right, up to down. But with the ringing of this bell, breathe deeply. Feel the sensations of your breath, the air brushing against the skin within your nasal passage and your nostrils, and enter into the present moment. Watch as your identification shifts from that tiny little circle to this so much larger one. Watch your relationship with your mind change. Where you begin to observe your mind from a space that is so much more vast. And these very same teachers, they refer to this space as a space of kindness, of knowing, of wisdom. Why do they use words such as kindness and wisdom? Simply because you enter into a space where you no longer find the need to distinguish yourself from your fellow practitioners, from the other forms around you. be they friends, family, strangers walking outside your window. You're tapping into a space that is so much more vast, that exists within every leaf, every blade of grass, every flower petal, every brick, every pebble, every grain of sand. The loneliness fades into the background, because loneliness can only exist where there is a perceived separation. Your attention moving towards the stomach, where you continue to watch your breath and how it translates into and through the movement of the stomach wall. Have you noticed that the mind, for some of us, you'll notice how bored and impatient the mind is getting. And this is a good thing in this practice, simply because when you notice boredom arising, you know that you're thinking about the practice. And it becomes an indicator, a reminder to return back into the experience of skin stretching, the stomach wall rising as you breathe in, the stomach wall falling as you exhale and as you breathe out. And if your mind does get bored, you also begin to recognize another quality of the mind, how it likes to be constantly stimulated. It seeks out conversation, stimulating, interesting conversation, interesting people, interesting books, movies, podcasts, new places to visit. But this practice, we're reducing the amount of stimulation just so that where there is stimulation of the mind, it becomes a little bit more difficult to observe it. And that's why many of us, we have our eyes closed, because a lot of stimulation enters in through the eyes. And so the eyes are closed. I hope the body is fairly comfortable, or at least as comfortable as you could possibly be, because whatever you're left with, whatever sensations you're left with after doing everything that you can to be comfortable, they become tools in the practice. Sensations that you may find yourself pushing against and resisting. But there is another trick that you can play with the mind. Because I think we've all acknowledged the mind likes to be interested, the mind likes things to do. So why don't we give it something to do? Well, right now we are directing it to the stomach. And every time we breathe in, let's tell the mind to recite the word rising, rising, rising. And let the mind align itself with the skin around the stomach. Let the mind feel the muscles underneath that layer of skin. Let the mind align itself with the areas within the stomach that balloon as we breathe in, rising. And the mind, it recites these words silently, rising, rising, rising. And as you exhale and as you release and as you breathe out, falling, falling, falling. Rising and then falling. Now the mind is occupied. How simple a practice. Sometimes you get glimpses of silence, of the stillness of this present moment, because the mind is still moving. The mind still goes to all of those plans that you have. Some of those things that happen that have very strong emotional momentum. But that's fine. When you notice it being carried away, you just return back to the sensation, which may either be a rising or a falling. And soon you will begin to discover another fascinating quality of the mind, which is its ability to focus on only one thought in a moment. And if it's focusing on the rising and the falling, it's no longer focusing on those conversations, events, histories, stories. If it's focusing on the rising and the stretching and the ballooning and then the falling and the contracting and the exhaling, it's no longer concerned about those forecasts that you heard on social media or on the news. You become more fully present in this present moment, possibly than ever before, until your mind takes you away. But it doesn't matter. It no longer matters if the mind carries you away, because you have quite consciously guided yourself into the present moment. And experiencing the present moment is exactly that. It is an experience. It is no longer a memory. It is an experience which leaves a very deep imprint within your very self. An imprint is so much easier to return to. And now I'm going to ring the bell. An opportunity to stretch, to move, to have a sip of water, to even find a new posture if that's something that would help your practice. But before I ring the bell, let's remind ourselves that we can, even as we change our posture, as we have that sip of water, as we stretch, as we move, we can bring a very deep sense of continuity to the practice by being aware from this moment of what's happening in the mind. I said I'd ring the bell, but I haven't rung the bell. Impatience may be arising, especially if you're uncomfortable in your body or if you're thirsty. Notice that impatience. Notice the image of the stretch or the outstretched arms or the new posture. Notice where your mind is taking you, and then simply observe it and return back into the witness, being the witness of these movements. And instead of seeing those outstretched arms as an end in themselves, or the drink of the water flowing down your throat as an end in itself, more important than the process of picking up the glass, stretching out your arms, coordinating your muscles. Remove your judgment, release your judgments, and let every movement be as important as the next, giving attention and awareness to the movements of the mind, the joints of the fingers and the elbows and the knees, and simply bring that continuity to the practice. Is there a particular part of the body that might benefit from a little massage or a change in the posture? Just try it and then experience the relief, that soothing feeling, how easy it is to bring relief to the body. And now a bell to return you back into whatever position it is that you've chosen to be in for the remaining parts of this practice. Where we will continue to play games with the mind. We will continue to occupy the mind, and this time using a visualization practice. Because much of what we have spoken about, contemplated on, are quite abstract concepts of the mind being a separate entity from who I truly am. That can be quite shocking, especially for many of us who have completely identified ourselves with our minds. Moving through its roller coaster of rides, ups and downs and lefts and rights, when all we needed to do was to step outside of the roller coaster and be the observer. And in this visualization, we will use the mountain. The mountain which, on this planet in which we live in, perhaps represents that which has, that structure which has been here longer than most. At least those that are visible to the naked eye. And so bring into your mind's eye a mountain that you may have seen with your own eyes, and if not, just conjure up a mountain from your imagination, from that library that you have within that filing cabinet within the mind. Three-dimensional with its peak. And then as you pan out, as you move back, you begin to grasp its scale, its vastness. And this mountain is coming to represent who we are, who we truly are. And so our heads merging into this image, the tops of our scalps becoming the peak of this mountain, the cheeks, the nose, the back of the head, the sides of the peak, and further down the shoulders and the arms forming one of the sides, and then the chest and the back, the other two sides. And if you can tune into your bodies, the very core of your bodies, the spinal column with its arch, feeling the arch within the spine as you make your way downwards towards the pelvic region, and you feel the surfaces upon which your body rests on. Feeling the stability of the surface that supports your body. Finding the center of gravity within your body. For some of us, it might be around the navel area. Feeling your breath through your stomach. The rising, rising, rising. And the falling, falling, falling. But now as you breathe in, allowing your breath to move into your stomach and carry your center of gravity lower and lower down, so that it even begins moving through your body into the cushions and the chairs and the surfaces underneath you. Because you're beginning to notice how what you see of the mountain is only a small part of it. And as you breathe in, the breath moving down into the crust of the earth, moving miles and miles and miles into and underneath the surface, tuning and joining and anchoring yourself into the stability of the surface underneath you. So that you begin to experience yourself as this sitting, breathing, great rock of pure awareness, of presence. And how we share so many similarities with this mountain. How this mountain sustains a whole ecosystem of life. There is much life within the streams that flow down this mountain. Just as there is much life within the rivers of blood that flow through our veins. As you breathe in, tune into this life that cannot really be defined. This life beyond limits. This life that moves and merges into the crust of this planet we call Earth, which somehow manifests itself as the other mountains, the other hills, the other lands, the other continents, all connected. Perhaps even giving us a glimpse into the way in which we are all connected. Not only with our fellow human beings and fellow practitioners, but with all of nature. From the mineral kingdom to the plant kingdom to the animals and the birds and that which live within water. Perhaps giving us a glimpse into the kindness that we sometimes seek to express. Glimpses into the connection that we have with each other and all that exists. Tuning into the organs within your body. And when I ring the bell, if you find any pockets of stress or tightness within your body, be like the mountain and simply release them. Notice how the mountain allows the trees and the fields and the flowers to grow. It allows the leaves to fall off the trees as autumn arrives. It allows the streams and the rivers to simply gravitate in whichever direction they choose. It allows the salmon to swim in whatever direction they choose. And so we enter into this space of deep allowing the balance within our bodies. To achieve the equilibrium, the healing, that intelligence within every cell of our bodies that we refer to as the immune system. activated as we no longer interfere, no longer instructing the rivers to flow in a certain direction, no longer instructing baggage to be stored here and there, simply releasing and allowing. And if you like, when I ring this bell, step above the mountain and to its sides and underneath it. Witnessing this body, witnessing this form, switching identification from matter initially into mind through imagination, and then from mind into awareness and presence, which includes the space that covers the peaks, that bathes every surface, every valley, that space around every blade of grass and every leaf and every branch and every twig and every rock and every pebble and every grain of sand. And where does the mind fit into all of this? Can you notice the clouds that move around this mountain? Can you notice the mist, the occasional storms? They always pass. Unless we accidentally and mistakenly believe ourselves to be the clouds, which is where anxieties and worries and angers and frustrations arise. That mistaken identification. But simply breathe. Bring your attention back to your breath, back to the sensations. Rising, 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 falling, falling, falling. And let the storms pass. Let the clouds pass. Some may be gray, some may be stormy, some may be white and fluffy, taking the shapes of horses and elephants, even Mickey Mouse. That makes us smile. But we witness, we observe. No matter how enticing and tempting it is to identify with a cloud, we simply allow them to pass. As we stay anchored and grounded into this space of kindness, wisdom, understanding, and infinite amount of patience, because there is no longer the need to be anything else, be anywhere else. Simply because there is an awareness of the perfection of this moment. How this peak, this great rock of awareness that we find ourselves to be, devoid of standards that exist from the past and future, represent pure perfection. And now the final bell, followed by the bell that will represent the beginning of the true practice, where we will bring this great rock of awareness with us, where we will be this great rock of awareness as we watch the clouds and the different experiences, the different people appear before us and disappear from moment to moment and breath to breath.